Good afternoon, folks, or good midday. Welcome to day 8 of the Sarasota Film Festival here today at Ringling College of Art and Design. My name is Paul Ratner. I'm the managing director of Film Festival. I also teach here at Ringling. I am very excited to introduce one of our 2 SFF talks, sort of a project that is close to my heart, and I really love bringing great folks together to talk film or related topics. Today we're talking about filming in Florida. This coming Sunday we have another panel at 11 at New College where we're going to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence on filmmaking. So I encourage everyone to check that out. That's going to be very interesting. Just a brief note, we're still here this weekend for the film festival. We actually have a lot of screenings still coming up. We just added a whole slate of encore films that are going to be screening tomorrow at the Sarasota Art Museum. So if you'd like to check out some of our most popular films, you can do so tomorrow. We're basically there all day from 11 to 8:30. The day is capped tomorrow by a screening of Baby Invasion, a latest film from Harmony Korine, who is going to be there as well. So I hope you can all check it out. And just one more note, tonight is a big street party, so if you don't have tickets yet, you still can make it. It's our biggest party of the year. It's on 4th Street. In Rosemary District, right between Coconut Avenue and Central Avenue. So I hope you can make it out there. It'll be lots of fun. We're going to have a DJ. We're going to have a great performance from West Coast Black Theater. We're going to have folks from Godfather of Harlem, a TV show that's who are here in town. So it's going to be a great event. So now, without any more ado, I'd love to introduce Christian Blaveld, who is the digital director of IndieWire, who is going to moderate today's discussion. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. I'm Christian Beloved. I'm the digital director of IndieWire, and I'm a resident of St. Pete, actually, just about an hour north of here. So this topic is really near and dear to my heart to talk about filming in Florida, and I'm just so excited that we're going to have this discussion today with Tyler Martinolich, the film commissioner of Film Tampa Bay. Welcome, Tyler. And also Jerry Chambliss, who owns the production company Ilum Productions right here in Sarasota. So Jerry, welcome. Both of you, thank you so much. So, I think that, I was born in St. Pete. I had to pursue my career for a number of years in New York before being able to move back here during the pandemic. And there's nothing I've loved more throughout just my life as a film lover than movies that are filmed in Florida. In fact, Jerry, a film that you produced, Bridge to the Other Side by Katie Curran, actually, we gave that the honorable mention a couple years ago at this festival when I was on that narrative jury. And, I just think about like the 2010s were kind of a renaissance for Florida film. We had Spring Breakers, we had Magic Mike, we had, even just more recently, like 2019, 2020, we had Zola. Really interesting, bold films that had a real vision. I think there was a magazine that actually said that these were like Tampa core films, like actually tried to coin a term, like they had a certain aesthetic and kind of a wild, unique indie sensibility. And now it doesn't really feel like any that much filming is happening here. And now some of you here may know why that is, but I'm curious to hear from you guys what happened. I guess, Tyler, to start with you, like why isn't the next Spring Breakers being made here right now?
So it's a little loud. So as most of you guys probably know, there's very few industries in the world that are more incentivized than the film industry is. We were a beneficiary of having a very robust statewide film incentive for many, many years. In fact, at one point, we were the 3rd largest filming destination in the United States. And that was largely true up until about 2014, moving into 2015. And in 2015, the legislature allowed our previous program to sunset. They had all the opportunities to reinvest in it and continue it on, and they decided not to. And as a result, we saw a mass fleeing of productions from the state. And that starts at the very high level, right? So your Burn Notices, your Ballers, your Glades, Transformers, things like that. Those are the first to leave over the first year or so of losing the production incentive program. But then it starts trickling down to the smaller TV series, the unscripted TV series, and finally it starts hitting the independent features, right? And it's it's multi-layered. It's not just the incentive itself. It's obviously important. But at a certain point, we stop having enough crew to really flesh out a very large production. Maybe on the indie side, if you're in the 35, 40 person crew range, there's still plenty of very qualified people. But if you are the next Transformers or another very large serialized TV show, you need hundreds of crew people, right? And it's very difficult to find those types of crew left in the state. It doesn't mean there's not qualified crew here. There are, but in lieu of having all those large-scale productions, we really sort of doubled down on commercials. And commercial crews are very different from feature or television crews. Commercial crews, they're not used to working in long increments of time. It's usually 2, 3, 4 days a month, and they're getting paid many, many, many times higher than a feature crew or a television crew will. So it's very difficult to make the case to a production crew who works on, let's say, public commercials to take themselves offline for 2 months when they could make the same amount of money in 5 days. So it's not that we don't have great crew, we do, but they're usually overcosted for features or independent films. And then you add in the fact that we don't have enough crew, and then we don't have incentives at large. There's like many boxes checked that says there's better places to shoot than here. Now, I would argue against that, but that's sort of the top line thinking in most producers' ideas and minds.
Well, because there is a bottom line, I mean, it is like if financially you don't have the budget to shoot in Florida, if it doesn't make, if there's like no way that you can recoup the cost of your production because you don't have the tax incentives here, then they're not going to shoot here. And so we had a situation like last year. I thought it was a really lovely film, but this film Suncoast from Searchlight that was on Hulu last year, set in Clearwater, filmed in South Carolina, and maybe just like a day of shooting some exteriors in Clearwater, but that was it. And, that's really unfortunate. I'm sorry, but like in South Carolina, I can't sub in for Florida,
It can't. And has anyone seen the TV show Florida Man? Maybe a little derogatory as far as what's going on in Florida and a little hyperbolized. But they tried shooting that in Savannah and Tybee Island area. And they found out that, hey, we still need most of these exteriors back in Florida. So even though they made a big splash that, hey, we're never going to film in Florida because we don't have incentives, they still ended up crawling back to get actual natural Florida caught on camera because you really can't duplicate it anywhere else. You can make it look close, but you can't really capture that Florida feel.
No, you really can't.
But it is with a smaller crew and a smaller budget.
Absolutely. And it's an unscripted show largely. So, I mean, it's got a little scripted, unscripted elements to it. But that was a team of 25 people.
Right. And they're willing to take that cost cut because of the fact that it's a smaller crew and they can get everything else done in a place that does have incentives. And that's the big issue that we have here is that, we're losing that across the board. And so therefore, with the larger crews that, work on a much, much larger, longer period of time, they're looking for work elsewhere because it's more incentivized and it's more consistent.
I mean, Jerry, what's it like, owning a production company based here in Sarasota? You've been involved with feature films, you're involved with animation, VFX, post-production, but, how much of your output, has to be more toward commercials or other ventures than feature filmmaking now?
Yeah, exactly. So when I first came back to Florida, we were in animation and VFX pretty much 90% of the business. I had worked in Chicago and New York with an animation company that did cross-platforming of multimedia and stuff. So I did have a lot of on-set live action experience because we were bringing that into the animation industry. When I came back here, there was hardly any animation business whatsoever, and most of my clientele was out of state, and so I was doing a lot of traveling and stuff, and as much as I was trying to incentivize animation to come here, it just really wasn't happening. So I started transitioning more and more over to live action. I was doing a lot of first AD and a lot of producing, some directing and stuff, and as you said, I started transitioning into more indie work, and like you were saying with the incentives were really, really good at the beginning of the 2000s, and I literally was lined up for 5 features that were here, and then we got a change in political incentives got cut, and 4 out of those 5 projects left: Louisiana, South Carolina, Georgia, and then 1 lost funding altogether because the crutch of this was built on Florida's Gulf Coast look. So so with a company like mine, I pivoted as you have to do, and started doing branded content, started doing B2B, C2C, and then started doing indie work with a lot of independent directors, started going on and producing those projects. And what we found out was that it was much, much more difficult to raise funds for that. So the upside is that we have a tremendous amount of nonprofit companies in the area. And we found that based on the content that we were creating, the nonprofits were apt at coming in and working with us and collaborating with us and partnering with us because the message of the narrative was to the degree of what they were looking for to and house their projects and what the companies were talking about. So our benefit was partnering with nonprofits. So it's a business, it's a much different business model. They really don't understand a lot about film business as a whole, so there was a lot of education and discussion and shifting, but it's been pretty fruitful for us at this time.
I mean, that's the thing. You've got to pivot if, you're not able to take on a feature film or TV productions or, luckily these are skills that can be leveraged in so many different ways. Having a branded content studio, working for creating content for nonprofits. There's so many different ways to leverage these skills. And I know a lot of people have had to adapt in that regard, but it's an interesting thing because so we know that the tax incentive situation really dried up here in Florida the past few years. And, even in the past year, there was huge cuts to arts funding just writ large across the state. And so, Tyler, I'm curious, you're the film commissioner of Film Tampa Bay. We have a lot, so we don't have a state film office. We don't have any statewide program. We have a constellation of local offices, though, that try to create their own localized incentives. How is that working? And what are the inherent challenges of having kind of a patchwork of local offices?
Yeah, so just for some more context, 39 states in the U.S. have some sort of state-level film incentive. Sometimes it's a rebate, sometimes it's a tax credit. All but 5 states in the U.S. have a state-level film commission. We are one of the dubious 5 that does not. We got rid of ours almost 2 years ago now when they changed from economic development to the Department of Commerce. We got written out. There was no reason to do that. It seemed very targeted and I won't say malicious, but there was certainly an axe to grind, I think, at some level. So we as a state had to adjust. Not only do we not have a state-level tax incentive, we do not have a state film commission that is broadly representing the entire state, right? I work for Hillsborough County and Tampa Bay. I can only promote Hillsborough County and Tampa Bay. Even if I know there's a great location somewhere else, I really can't share that or market that because I'm not paid by those people, right? I'm paid by the taxpayers of Hillsborough County. So it really becomes almost kind of a knives out situation where it's little fiefdoms everywhere throughout the state. And we try to be as collaborative as we can at the top level, but at the end of the day, there's only a finite number of productions coming to the state, so we're all fighting in the same sandbox for the same limited amount of productions. So it really does pit us against each other in a way I think it's negative that I don't always appreciate. We try to find ways to collaborate when we can, but we've had to pivot as a state, and that's really doubling down on commercials. Commercial productions are not incentivized. We are evergreen 24/7. We are able to benefit from that where most other states can't, even going up to Georgia. Georgia does not look great during the winter. They have deciduous trees. It looks gray and not great. Sometimes it snows. Not the perfect weather when you're trying to shoot your spring and summer collateral and you're trying to do that in March, right? You're not doing that there. So we still are a huge beneficiary of commercials, and I think that's a disconnect where a lot of people think there's not a lot of productions going on. There are. We had over 400 commercials shoot in Tampa last year, and it's kind of under the radar. We don't really talk about them. Media doesn't really cover when a Lexus commercial is shooting on the Crosstown Expressway. They don't get that hype, but there's a lot of productions going on here. So we still have a very strong production entity, not just in Tampa Bay, but really statewide. But we can't lose our feature crews. That's what we're really fighting for day after day. Because again, like I said, commercials and features don't really cross streams. So how do we do that? We were one of the first states, if not the first state, to really start introducing localized incentives. And we have that, like you said, a constellation of different film commissions. There are now 6 counties in the state. So it's Hillsborough, it's Pinellas, it's Broward, Miami, Duval, and soon to be Orlando. All have some sort of localized incentive. Now, that's great, but I'll tell you, working in local government, we don't have the pockets that a state does. So our money only goes so far. But having some sort of incentive is usually enough of a way to crack a door open in a conversation to start looking at those productions that are usually 2 million or below. That's where we can still incentivize at a level that's meaningful to most productions. We're not going to get the next Transformers, next Marvel movie. We're probably not going to get the next scripted TV series. But if you're in that 2 million or below range, we're really, really good at finding ways to make it more economical to come here than it is Georgia. Georgia might have better incentives. I'm just using Georgia as sort of a monolith for all the other states that have incentives. But the cost is much, much higher. They have so much production going on. It's hard to find studio space. In fact, it's virtually non-existent in Atlanta right now. You can't find anybody. Crews are booked up months in advance. Gear booked months in advance. Start adding in all those costs. Yeah, you might be getting 30% back, but how many crew am I have to bring in from out of state? What am I paying for in hotels? What am I paying for in bringing in extra equipment? And it kind of balances it out a little bit. So we're able to be very effective in that range. But if you get over $2 million, then the incentive just really isn't attractive enough from the financier's perspective. And more importantly, when you get to larger levels, they're expecting more crew, bigger gear, and we don't really have that anymore. It's like a Zola, perfect. That's like our wheelhouse, right? We can do that. We can do a Harmony Korine, Spring Breakers, or a Sunlight Junior. But as soon as you get over that $3-5 million range, we don't really play in that sandbox anymore.
Yeah, and that's the negative thing too, like you were saying with localized incentives. Sarasota did have a localized incentives too, but then like you were saying, our film commission got disbanded and then it got pushed into the EDC, but then the EDC didn't have anybody that was really representing film and film industry here. So then that kind of trickled down. And so they have what's basically called a liaison. If somebody needs to have a film or something made here, then there might be somebody that might be able to answer some questions with regards to permits and work accounts and stuff like that. But then it was also where the incentives were only for localized Sarasotian filmmakers, film crew, film actors and stuff, and anybody outside of that was not part of the incentive program. So then you had to mark that off of the budget tally to retract what that was for the incentives for that percentage. But then Sarasota then just kind of disbanded and didn't really have anything. And so I don't know, is Tampa the same way where you have to have local Tampa crew and cast and everybody?
It's a great question. So
On that?
that's another issue that people have trouble navigating when they come to the state if they're looking for incentives. And yes, there is 6 counties that have fairly meaningful incentives, but each one is completely written differently. So if you're jumping counties and you're taking advantage of a couple different incentives, it's really hard to actually work that out on a top sheet of a budget, right? How does that work?
Paperwork's insane.
Insane. But some counties have really struggled for crew, specifically tied to residency within that county. So I'm not going to pick on them, but Palm Beach, for example, or I should say Broward, has a 70% requirement. Crew has to be local, which is great for locals, right? It is local dollars they're going into, so you do want locals to benefit from it. But if I'm a large production, there's not enough crew to match 70% of my production needs. So I'm either disqualified from the incentive or I get an incentive at a lower amount, and that's not great. So it is very difficult. Tampa is not that way. We do not have a crew requirement. We do have a percentage of production requirement. And we do prioritize productions that hire more locals, that put more heads in beds, that are using more third-party services in Tampa Bay. We don't make that a requirement. So our thinking is they're going to spend the money here either way. So whether they're bringing in crew from out of town and putting them up in hotels, we're still benefiting from bed tax, or if they can hire local, all the better. But we really want the productions to come here because otherwise we just don't have that pipeline of productions that people in the feature world need to continue to have a reason to stay here.
And there's a huge brain drain as a result. I mean, people who do train, in the cinematic arts here, then they're going to go elsewhere, and it's really, really a shame. I mean, Jerry, you've probably seen that, people who have been making films in this area or across the state, and then they feel like they have to go elsewhere to develop their career.
Every project. The thing that a producer loves and a team as a whole is to find those people that you have a like-minded conversation with. So when you start working with those people and they do a really good job, they have a really good work ethic, they're really skilled at their job, you want them over and over and over again. And as you do hire them over and over again, they start to have a secondary language within each of the departments within the crews themselves. And so it's incentivized just to bring them back. But like you said, over the last couple of projects that I've produced, we have lost crew crew to different counties, different states. I've got to make my bread, I understand. Plus, the incentivization has also cost, top bottom lines. And so you're having to ask them for discounts and half day rates and stuff like that, which you never ever want to do, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. And so it's to lose somebody that you've had a working relationship for the last 10, 15 years. It's a heart-wrenching thing, but it's an understandable thing and you can't fault them for it. So.
You have to go where the money is. You have to go where you can have a career. It's totally understandable.
And I do want to bring up, COVID really hurt everybody in the industry, and the industry as a whole, not just in Florida, really suffered, and we have not gotten back to where we were pre-pandemic. In fact, there's 40% fewer productions this last year nationwide than there was pre-pandemic. And that's also seen at the box office, people going out and watching movies in theaters. But as far as the film industry went, there was a lot of people within 5-6 years of retirement that just said, I'm getting out of this right now. Like, I've already vested, I'm taking my pension and going. And there's a lot of people that were trying to get into it at that time, didn't have a job to cut their teeth on, and they ended up going some different direction. So we lost basically a generation of incoming filmmakers, and we lost a generation of filmmakers that we probably could have gotten another 5-10 years out of had they not retired.
That also expanded the budget as well. COVID really hit our bottom line in terms of having to have an extra crew with medical and all of the tests and such like that as well.
I think the equation actually ended up being about $150,000 per million. So for every million spent, you spend an additional $150,000 just on COVID protocols.
And I don't know if you know this, but Bridge to the Other Side was on the tail end of COVID, and we were going into the omnivirus. And so we literally were testing twice a day. And we were asking our crew to please not do anything outside of what they were having to do, like parties or going to families or anything like that, because we actually, for the grand scheme of things, we only lost 2 crew members to COVID during our production. So we were really, really frugal with it, but we still lost some, and it still pivoted. We still had to pivot, and we still had to be set back a little bit. And it was a real thing. And yeah, like you were saying, we lost a lot of good people for that.
It's such a shame. And, I want to bring the audience into this right now as well. If you have any questions, like at any time, feel free to raise your hand and ask Tyler and Jerry, anything that strikes you about the film business or anything, because I think this is such an important conversation. I mean, if you're here, you care about movies, you care about production. And I know, like, for me, it's just like another example, like when I saw St. Pete depicted in David Fincher's The Killer, and it's literally just filmed in New Orleans and shot at night, and like in shadows to completely disguise that it's not St. Pete and looks nothing like it. It's like, that just really aggrieves me. I feel like it's really upsetting. But yeah. So raise your hand anytime you have. Oh, you've got a question right here.
So that is an excellent question, and I do want to preface this by saying that this really isn't a right or left issue. Some of the most incentivized states in the U.S. are almost entirely Republican held, right? So it really isn't. It's an ideological difference between different states. So in the state of Florida, incentives are anathema. Whether you're on the left or the right, you don't want to talk about that at the legislative level. The only way that changes if there is some top-down leadership from the governor's office that says this is what I want as a priority. If you guys remember, who created the tax incentives for the state of Florida was Jeb Bush. And it was continued on through Charlie Crist, very robustly too, I might add. Like, both of them were very gung-ho about creating a state film office, getting in the incentive game, attracting productions here. And that has slowly changed over time to where now we don't incentivize anything. And the example they always use is that we had Racetrack was our number one gas station in the state, right? And then we incentivized Wawa to come down here, and we gave them money to do so, and they built a Wawa across the street from every racetrack in the state. Well, that kills Racetrack, right? They can't compete at the same level. So that's the argument they always use when you bring up incentives. Now, this was easier to argue for when we had a state film commission, because now we're even further behind the 8 ball, because even if we could flip the switch tomorrow and have the legislature pass a new incentive, have the governor sign that into law, there's no one to administer it. So not only do we have to create an incentive, we have to create a brand new film commission at the state level just to be able to administer it, right? So that's 2 steps now we have to get past, and it's very difficult. I do not personally see a path to that happening in the next 2 legislative cycles. It's really going to take a groundswell of younger leadership coming in who either sees the forest through the trees and understands incentives are needed, or people who just realize that, hey, we've lost an entire industry as a state. We need to reinvest in that. But that's what it's going to take. And it's also going to take someone at the top level, again, could be right or left, doesn't matter, but someone at the governor's level that says, hey, we believe in productions, we believe in film tourism, we believe that this is good for our local economy. Until that happens, it's really going to be difficult. But the only good thing I can say is that, and again, this goes back to fighting in the sandbox with competitors, but more and more counties are seeing that, hey, we're losing out, and if the state's not going to do it, we got to do it ourselves. Stealing their thunder, but Orlando's bringing back their film commission in a very big way next year. They're launching a brand new incentive program. That is incredibly encouraging. We're continuing to double down on our incentive. St. Pete is. Miami has a $50 million film incentive. Broward has a $37 million incentive program. So there's a lot of counties that are trying to step into that gap. Can we effectively do it together? It's difficult, again, because we're operating against each other. We really need someone at the state level just to wrangle all the troops and say, hey, we're collectively trying to build the state. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's going to be very difficult. What actually has to happen is it has to pass 3 committees in the House, 3 committees in the Senate, has to be ratified on the floor of both houses, then it has to go into a bill and be signed by the governor. That's a lot of steps, and we try every year.
They've been pushing through incentive processes, but they have been being squashed left, right, and center because it is so difficult to get it through those multi-levels.
Is there, in lieu of, the state support, is there someone who can lobby on behalf of all the different individual entities, all the local film commissions to sort of speak collectively on your behalf? Actually, this is something I was wondering as well. Like, is there any way? I know that you rely on Hillsborough County funding, and so that there is not really an incentive necessarily to work with Broward County or Pinellas County. But is there some way to break through that and create sort of like a constellation of like a way that you can all work together harmoniously so that the industry can just say, hey, there's one person here who we can go to, because otherwise they don't really know who to go to, like within the state.
Yeah, and I'll also answer his previous question was also what was kind of the nickels and dimes at the original program. So let's start there. Depending on what year you go back and look at the analytics and how they were scoring it, and the program did evolve over time. It was either a 4-to-1 return in our favor or a 10-to-1 return in our favor. And then they added in digital media and gaming at large, and that is when the ROI plummeted because it was mostly going to payroll for full-time people at your EA Sports and things like that. And the pay was a lot lower than what it would otherwise have been. Florida Tax Watch did a wonderful recap of our program as a whole and showed that if you deducted the gaming and just focused on true film and film production, it was a 4-to-1 return on investment, which is great. Most programs, you're lucky to score a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-1. In fact, some programs get away with a 50 cent to $1 return. Is looking at the local counties, there's a difference between a tax credit and a rebate. So we're all rebate based. We don't have tax credits to sell. So we know what our ROI is in advance because they have to spend it before they get it. So it's a 10% for Hillsborough. I believe Pinellas is 20%. You can get up to 20% in Broward and Miami-Dade. So you know what you're getting back because they have to spend it first. And I think that's probably a wiser way to do it. And we've tried to pitch programs at the state level that sort of mirror that because you do have a sort of a built-in ROI. Now, as far as someone advocating at the state level, we are one of the only states in the U.S. to have a statewide film trade organization, which is called Film Florida. Film Florida is excellent. They have their own lobbying team, in fact, one of the best lobbyists in the state. And we are able to get bills on the floor and on dockets for individual committee meetings that would never otherwise be on there because we have such a strong legislative team around us for Film Florida. The issue is always leadership. Bills do not move, whether they have the votes or not, if leadership doesn't give the go-ahead to move them from one committee to the next. And in the House in particular, it's very difficult. Legislators in the House are only able to have 4 total bills a year. Most of those bills are assigned to them. and they might get one or two discretionary ones, but you're really going to prioritize in your head what is the one thing that I told my constituents that I'm going to do this year. So getting someone in the House to champion a film bill is very difficult. Yet we've been able to do that every single year through Film Florida. The Senate's much different. Senate's supposed to be the wiser elder legislators who deliberate a little more, and we have very strong, passionate people in the legislature, really on the House and the Senate side, that support film. It always comes down to leadership, though, and sort of top-level management from the governor's office. Does that answer your question?
And the thing is, it's not really a right versus left issue. I mean, it's like you look at, we've talked about Georgia, we've talked about South Carolina. They have very robust incentive programs. Texas did not have a great incentive program, but just a couple years ago, really because of Taylor Sheridan and really aggressive efforts to court the state government and Governor Greg Abbott, they got like a $200 million incentive.
Oklahoma, out of the blue, turned-keyed a production company, and now there was more productions in Oklahoma last year than any other state, which is mind-blowing, right? It's Oklahoma. If you've ever driven through Oklahoma, there's not a whole lot of location options.
I mean, that's right. There was Twisters. There was Killers of the Flower Moon. I remember I was interviewing like the cast of, I think it was actually Cha-Cha Real Smooth a few years ago. And there was this kid actor in that who was based in Oklahoma. And he was like, actually, I have my whole career in Oklahoma. I can just act in movies here all the time. That's amazing. And that's the kind of thing we wish we had that in Florida, and maybe we can have it again someday, but it's just such a challenge. Any other questions? Oh, right there. So is the crux of this issue right here just like getting actual cash, or is it getting tax breaks?
So I think incentive is the wrong word to use. In fact, I hate that word because it seems like it's a carrot drawing productions someplace. And the reality is it's not. It's built into the way films are financed now. It isn't expected. It's not an added thing on top of, right? Especially if you're in the indie world, you need that $1 investment. That's how you're going to be able to do a pay-or-play contract with an actor, whoever you need in a principal position to be able to get more investment, right? And you usually do that with some sort of backstop or guarantee. So if I know that I'm getting 30% back on my $1 million budget, right, and I've already got the contract in place with Georgia or wherever you're at, I can then take that and either go to an entertainment branch of a bank and get a gap loan against that because it is a government contract, that money is going to be there, or I can go to a savvy investor and say, hey, I need X number of dollars of $1 million budget. If you give me $300,000, I can guarantee you're going to get that back. Now, there's still a risk. Obviously, you still have to get across the finish line. If the movie never gets made, you're never getting your money back. But that is something that is absolutely needed in most cases for film financing. You have to have that in place to be able to get your $1 investment. That's an excellent point.
Putting aside just, the politics and bashing Hollywood just to bash Hollywood, why doesn't someone else step in to, help out?
But just at the government level, just basic economics, depending on the state. So Georgia is not a balanced budget state. They can run a deficit, and they do every single year. California, famously, massive deficit. Florida, balanced budget. So anytime we create a program, we have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And if you're a legislator, I only have a finite number of dollars that I can contribute to different pots. So am I going to go back to my constituents and say, hey, we got to spend $300 million to attract film productions here, but we got to take that from education or healthcare. It's got to come from someplace. That is a really hard argument to make to most people, even if you can define on paper that there's going to be a better ROI as a whole. You're bringing in more revenue as a state, which then can be allotted to other places. But just making that argument, it's really difficult. So as far as private industry goes, there's better ways to invest in films. Films are very risky propositions.
Right. With indie films, almost across the board, you're really not going to get the money back. And when we're working with nonprofits and such, we're very much upfront with them. It's about what the mission is. It's about what the message is of the film and stuff. And then we also try to, if we don't have any incentives in place where we can do a 4-to-1 percentage or something like that, then there's always tax breaks for people that donate. And so we try to give them paperwork and forms that in order for them to do write-offs on their other side. And then a lot of times the constituents that we have really want to be a part of it because they believe in the film and they believe in the message and stuff like that, and they just want to be a part of that, and they want, you know, to be able to say that I helped cultivate that and I helped create that and stuff. It's not the best option, it's not the best plan, but it's just showing that they have heart and they have spirit in this and they want to see it grow and they want to see their local community being shown and brought to attention, and they love that. They absolutely love that. Sarasodians, this county loves having Sarasota in films. They really, really love the community. They love our locale and they love our landscapes and stuff, and they want to see that represented and they want to see that on a larger scale. So for me, for Illumin Productions, and for what we do, a lot of the times it is more about the passion of the project than it is about trying to get the money back. Unfortunately, I mean, we always would love to be able to give the donation back that we get, the incentives and stuff like that, but it's just the nature of the beast here, unfortunately.
20 years ago, there was a path to profitability. You know, you were usually looking at domestic and international theatrical sales to get X number of dollars. Then you have your pass through retail outlets for video rentals, and then it would slowly trickle down to networks and then paid premium programming at some point. Now it's almost entirely bypassing all of that. It's a dump right to streaming services, and streaming services are not paying much. It's what we call a minimum guarantee, and that's usually the only money you'll ever see from that. Yes, if it catches lightning on a bottle, you might have residuals coming in and paychecks coming in for a couple of years, but usually whatever they pay you up front for it is all you're ever going to get out of it. And that, you might make $1 million movie and they might only pay you $150,000 for that movie. And there's really no other way to make money once you've sold it domestically. You might be able to accrue a couple dollars over a 3 to 5 year period through international sales. It's going to take a long time to recoup that money. It's really, really difficult to get to a certain profit margin, which is why you see most movies now either blockbusters that are a swing or a miss, and that's a big risk. Otherwise, they make a lot of money, or they're made for $800,000 or below, and then there is some chance of profitability. But if you remember in the '80s, there was all kinds of big movies that were in that $15 to $27 million range. Those are gone. Like, they just don't exist anymore. Even the streaming services are having a hard time justifying commissioning projects in that range anymore. So they either go big or they go small, and you're seeing a lot of content swapping now too. I think we're almost at saturation for most streaming services. It makes it even more difficult to sell a film these days. Look at Netflix, perfect example. You can now see HBO shows on Netflix, which if you've never been an HBO subscriber, but you've been a Netflix subscriber, it's new content to you. So all you're seeing is licensing agreements where they're swapping different platforms, really to get away from having to commission new work. So you're seeing fewer and fewer productions being made, fewer and fewer productions being purchased, and then that allows smaller streaming services like Tubi's of the world to come in and gobble up those smaller productions. But Tubi might give you $5. I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but not by much. It is so little, you will never, you won't even pay for a cup of coffee.
It's literally pennies on the dollar with the streaming services.
Yeah, so the core of this is that there just really isn't a market there to fund movies, for filmmakers to make money off a movie once it's released. You know?
It's a terrible example. Like there's going to be another Napoleon Diamond out there where it's just going to catch lightning in a bottle and make a lot of money, even though I'm very good friends with the people who made that movie and they never actually made any money off the movie, right? It was the studios made the money off of that. But there needs to be an evolution in the market and the price points. And I think that also has to come down to the industry realizing that, hey, I don't need to be paid $20 million to make this movie. And I think that needs to be some top-level leadership amongst the principals, the above-the-line cast and crew, who realize that if I want this industry to survive, I'm going to have to lower my expectations so I can make a great movie for a certain price point that there is profitability. We just can't, I mean, look at what happened with Snow White. I mean, holy cow. I mean, it had a lot of other issues with that, but they lost $300 million, something like that. They're not even going to break over $100 million, I don't think.
But why did that movie have to cost so much? You know, that's
exactly.
the thing. It's like, why do so many of these movies have to be $200 million? You know, I don't know. This gentleman right here.
Yes, a lot of the narrative why film.
I think there's a visibility question here that you're talking about as well. That basically, like, there are filmmakers here who are willing to make movies for like $2 million or under, who have done really good work. But how do you get those films seen? How do you promote them? How do you actually? I want to mention, like, there was this great movie that I saw this past year that was shot in Miami. It was about the Haitian immigrant community there, called Mountains. It was by Monica Sorrell. It premiered at Tribeca. It was picked up by Music Box Films. But, like, nobody was talking about this film, and it's such a shame. I put it on my top 10 for the year because I thought it was fantastic. But, like, just getting the scene, like, why can't a movie like that that's so good get seen?
Again, it's with the distribution overall. It's changed considerably over the last decade, over the last 15, 20 years. And, where studios were the premier for getting distribution deals made, now with all the streaming platforms, with all of the different types, like you were saying, with Tubi, with Hulu, with Apple Plus, Amazon, and so forth and so on, it's such a saturation that the deals are trickling down into what we were saying before, pennies on the dollar. And so you're not really able to get the money that you've put into the film back from the film and be able to take care of the investors and so forth and so on. So coming back to your question, filmmakers do need to come together, and it's like we were talking about earlier with the different counties trying to find a way to come together, which we need an overall support of the state in order to bring all the counties together so they can be a collective and they can be collaborative, as opposed to I got to take care of my own kind of thing. We are trying to do that. Like Film Florida is a wonderful advocate for this. It's just, again, bringing in and raising that capital, raising that money in order to be able to take care of the crews and the cast and the local people in order to get that to expand. It's slow, it's small. We are doing it in little pockets. It's just not large enough right now for us to be able to get us read seen again, us to be seen. But I think that, and here's the other thing too, how many of the local filmmakers are going to be able to finance their own films, right? And get other filmmakers to put into those films as well. And then, if you don't get it on a platform that, like lightning in a bottle, and it takes off, then again, you're basically looking at pennies on the dollar for that streaming distribution. And a lot of those deals don't really incentivize you, and that doesn't really kick you back to being able to say, hey, I'm going to make enough to finance my next project. So it's an ebb and flow kind of thing, unfortunately. And so we really work together with local people to try to assist us and help us out with that.
And I think it's also being savvy as a viewer too, and realizing that you're being manipulated in so many different ways on streaming services. So let's say you watch 2 horror movies on Monday and Tuesday, and just because you feel like a horror movie, but now the algorithm's going to catch that, oh, this person likes horror movies, and for the next 6 days after that, it's just going to show you horror movies, right? And then the scope gets narrower and narrower and narrower until you're not seeing any of the movies that you'd actually want to be watching, don't even know they're there. And that happens across all platforms, right? There's also internal manipulation where, whether you're Netflix or Hulu or whatever, you're pushing your own internal content as much as possible. So it gets harder and harder just to find the content that is being made that is really good at a smaller level. So that's one problem. I think there needs to be an adjustment at some of the larger, more visible film festivals like the Sundances to really start prioritizing indie films again and get away from that, evening flagship gala screening of something where they can get the big stars out for it. I think it also has to come down to, again, sort of above the line stars and filmmakers going out there and really pushing and advocating for smaller productions again. And that's not happening. But to your actual question about what's the pipeline, how do you get in it? I just had a great conversation with a very talented filmmaker 2 days ago who has a great product, is a great idea, and he's been trying to finance it the traditional way, and it's never going to happen. It's just not. He wants to make a $5-10 million movie. You're not going to be able to raise that these days. It's not going to happen. So then he tried scoping it down to $1 million, has had no success. But what he was able to do was raise about $250,000, and I told him, bootstrap it from there. Like, realize that you're never going to attain that higher level. You're never going to get that $1 million right now in your career. So make what you can with what you have. And then if you believe in it, go out there and push it out there, right? Go to every festival, try to get traction, do everything you can. There's got to be, at a certain point, the onus is on you, right? Go out and make the movie you can with the resources you have. Don't keep putting things off year after year, saying, oh, if I just got $1 million, if I just find this piece, or I'm going to talk to that person, if I could just get in front of this guy, he's going to write me a check. It's not going to happen. There's too many stories out there where people have banked everything on just meeting this one person. In this case, it was a Will Packard type individual. And they got in front of this person, they pitched their idea, and the guy was like, no, I'm going to pass. And he had put all the eggs in the basket to get to that one point, right? And it blew up in his face. And he wasted years of potential when he could have just done it himself. So is there a pipeline? Yes, the pipeline is you. The pipeline is what you can trade in favors with friends, family, whoever you need to make the movie you can at the level of money you can raise. And just don't write the next Transformers, write what you can raise money to. I always tell people, don't crash a car in a movie unless you can make it look as good as they do in Fast and Furious, right? So look at the resources you do have and make a movie with those resources, with the friends you have, at the budget level you have, right? And there's truly paths to success at $250,000. The risk there is so low. Now, that's not to say that's not a lot of money. It is, right? But it's easier to recoup 250 or near that than it is swinging for the fences at 800 or $1 million or $2 million. That is a huge risk, and you're probably never going to make that back. Does that answer your question? I mean, it's not a great answer, but it's the best I can give you.
And you can do that. Production value is key to everything. And so the pre-production, you put a lot of effort and time into the pre-production to stretch that $250,000 and really get great production value and calling in favors and stuff like that. You can make a really, really good movie. And a lot of times we also look at the idea of, can we do this on a spec? And if we can, marketability is key. Getting somebody to really be able to push, or you to be able to push that through the festivals and try to get somebody that really believes in the film that you made as a spec piece. That's how Whiplash happened, right? Whiplash was a spec little short, and they pushed the hell out of that thing, and then all of a sudden they got the funding to make the larger feature vision. So it is possible, but you really, really have to put your knuckles down, grind hard, and try to get every production value out of every penny that you can to make a really good film. You don't want to shortcut it, right? So it's better to write, two people in a single room versus trying to do, like he was saying, Tyler was saying, Transformers, where you've got 30 people with 50 locations and stuff. Don't. It's again about the narrative, it's about the story, and trying to get the production value out of that and really making a story that everybody can resonate with and go, oh, that's different, that's unique. And then we push on that.
The other thing, though, is that, if you're talking about a film that you can make for $250,000, maybe there's a way to recoup that, but can you still really make a living as a filmmaker on that kind of thing?
Ooh.
See, this is the thing. This is something we've reported a lot at IndieWire. Like lately, Sean Baker and Brady Corbet had just major Oscar contending films, and they've talked about they are broke. They basically cannot have a living from making movies that have just won Oscars.
Can you make a living? I do a lot of other things outside of Illume, but in fact, we have a film in the festival tomorrow that my daughter wrote and directed, and I produced for her and such. And I didn't take any money on it. We didn't make any money for her, but everybody else got paid. I took care of the entire crew. I took care of the cast. I took care of the locations. I took care of everybody else. But no, I didn't make any money on it, right? But it's a film that hopefully, we have enough run on it that people are getting excited about it, and they're looking forward to it. And we have discussions with people that potentially want to take this film further. So it's those kind of things that, no, I can't make the money now, but can I make the money later because I'm marketing it, because I'm pushing it, because I'm talking to people and getting it out in front of them, and hopefully they're excited enough that they can see the benefit and the purpose of this film for us to make money in the long run. So it's the long game versus the short. And then I do other projects. I am a contract instructor for film, so I taught here, and I ran a film program for an IB high school and such while doing Illume Productions. So I do what I do because those projects, with the incentives as the incentives fell, those projects fell, and I had to pivot and do something in order to keep my passion of making films alive. And I still make them every single year. It's just I have to fill it in and fill the gaps in.
This is not an industry to get in for the weak of heart. It really is something you have to grind on. But, it's what they say. You do one for you, one for them, right? Or vice versa. And, particularly in the state of Florida, which is so incredibly dependent on commercial productions. And there's commercials going on everywhere. But there's a ebb and flow to the season. So commercial season starts end of August, early September, and goes through about the end of November. Then it dies for the rest of December and January. No one works, and then it picks back up in February, and it goes until about mid-April. What did I mention there? Nothing in the summer. Nothing. So you see a lot of independent filmmakers in the state of Florida. They will grind all year long, saving every penny, working on commercials, knowing that summer is when they're going to make their independent feature, right? And you can get great crews because no one's competing for crew right then because everyone's out of work, right? It's the greatest time of year to make a movie, and people looking from outside in. I'm not going to go to Florida. There's hurricanes. There's hurricanes, definitely. I mean, look at Milton and everything else, but it usually comes much later than they think. They think soon as summer happens, there's going to be hurricanes and tropical storms. That's not true. I mean, I think we just pulled it we have a big feature coming to Tampa, and they were very nervous about hurricanes. It's like statistically, we've had like 2 hurricanes in the month of June. Like 2 in a 100-year history. So it's a pretty good bet you're not, now I'm going to say that, knock on wood, it's going to happen this year. But
the 1 year.
But there's ways to make money during the year, working in commercials, working in digital media, working in doing the things you love, but then keep grinding on that passion project when you have free time throughout the year, and know that, hey, when summer rolls around, that's when I'm going to get all my friends together. That's when I'm going to trade in my favorite. That's when I make my movie.
I think we have time for one last question, and then we do have to wrap. Right here, go ahead. Where's the hope? That's right, because everything we've said, a lot of it does seem rather depressing, but like, why go into filmmaking? What is the source of hope? Yeah.
You can. It just takes time. You have to have the passion for it. And yes, telling young filmmakers to stay with their hopes, to stay with their passions, it's not a false hope. And again, you're in this industry not because you're thinking that you're going to make billions of dollars. That you're in this industry because you love the craft. It's no different than a fine artist, doing paintings for a living and hoping that they're going to get in a gallery one day, right? Maybe they never will, but they love that craft and they're going to stay with it, right? Do you have to supplement? Yes, you have to supplement. But like Tyler's saying, the commercial work, the branded content work will give you that income that you need in order to pivot to your film work, to create a narrative storyline and stuff. And in Florida, yes, that's something that we have to do, right? There's other states where you can maybe make a little bit more on this and stuff, but it's not Florida, right? It's not this area. And they cannot make films that look like Florida, right? They try, but as Tyler said, they'll come back with a B crew and shoot locations for B-roll in order to make it look like it's Florida. So we love our state. We love what the state has to represent and the looks of it and such. We just have to supplement. We just have to pivot that. But I don't think that the downtroddenness of the fact that we don't have the incentives here is to tell a student who loves movies and loves the passion of making movies and has all of these stories to tell, sorry, you shouldn't do that because there's no way to make money here. I don't think that's the right message to send out to them.
There's going to be a student that has a short in this film festival right now that in 5 years from now is going to have a blockbuster feature that we never saw coming. I don't think any of us saw the streaming services. Like Twitch and other things being as popular as they are. There's other ways to make media content that we haven't even thought of yet that this younger generation is going to come up with in the next couple of years. Then I think you also have to acknowledge, like you said, commercials are very robust. People can make a lot of money in commercials. So right now, this is an actual fact. The median average for people working in film and digital media commercials in the state of Florida is $105,000 a year. That is a median wage. That is 64% higher than any other industry in the state of Florida. So there's plenty of money to be made out there. It might not be in feature films, but you have to cut your teeth somewhere. And look at some of the best directors working still today. Your Spike Jonzes, your Michel Gondry's. They all started out in commercials, and commercials are still really experimental. We've gotten away from the product stuff. Now it's all about storytelling and connecting with a consumer base. So there's a lot of opportunities to be very creative, tell a story, great writing, amazing cinematography in the commercial space. So any student who's feeling down, it's like, look, consider commercials, right? You can start there, build up your resume, and then translate that into making your passion project at some point.
It's a really unique creative challenge. How do you tell a story in 30 seconds? That's think of it also like the one for them, one for us. Maybe you make several for them, several commercials, and then you use that, make your feature. So
there's feature directors that keep going back and making commercials in between their time as well, because you love the craft and you can be so creative with it and you can be experimental with it, like Tyler was saying. Because again, we're really not relegated to 30 seconds anymore. You know, we're getting 1 minute, minute and a half branded content narrative commercials that are just taken and blowing up by storm.
David Fincher just made this commercial with a rat. I think it was for the Switch 2. It made no sense to me. And I was like, but that's David Fincher. And it looks like a David Fincher film. So there's still people at a very high level that are still coming back to commercials.
Gentlemen, this has been so great. Jerry, Tyler, thank you so much. This has been incredibly illuminating. Thank you for bringing all your insight to all of us here today. And
thank you guys for the great questions, too. That was great.
Seriously, really, really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My Guardian Angel, plays tomorrow here at 12 noon. Sure. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.